Hi there, this is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer, with another book review. In this video, we're discussing Magpie Wing, written by Max Easton. It's one of the books on the Miles Franklin Literary Award longlist for 2022. I'm not really sure how to recommend this book to people. Maybe if you like things like Train Spotters or things like that, you might like this book. I didn't really enjoy it that much. I felt like it was a book that seemed to be a lot of short stories that had no real link, and it felt like the author was just injecting a lot of himself into the book. A lot of his own opinions. I don't know if it's his own history or own things that he's done or friends of his has done. I'm not sure on all that aspect, but I just felt like it was a lot of him in the book. I didn't enjoy it that much, and I read it because it's on the long list for the Miles Franklin Literary Award. I wouldn't have read it otherwise, and I can't really say I'm glad I read it. The start of the book I thought was by far the best, and if the whole book was focused around the time frame of the start of the book, I would have enjoyed it more. Unfortunately, it wasn't, and so I think it was maybe the first quarter I liked. After that, I got through it because I wanted to finish it, but I didn't enjoy it that much. The book focuses on two siblings, Walt and Helen. At the start of the book, it focuses on their childhood a bit. So I think at the time, Walt's probably almost 10 and Helen is in early teens. So it focuses on that period of their life at the start and then goes through their childhood a few years, and then jumps into when they're young adults and then later on when they're adults in their 30s. In my opinion, the part when they're children is the best in the novel, and it's the most descriptive about their characters in their family life. And I think if the whole novel focused on that part of their lives, it would have been a much more enjoyable book. And this is where I get the impression that it is a lot of short stories just thrown together, because it just feels like we have a chunk of when they're in that age, their childhood, then it dramatically shifts to when I think they're maybe late teens, early 20s, and then jumps again, and then jumps again. And it just seems to be these jump cuts that happen with no real cohesion and no real aspect of time frame going on in the book. And I think the book suffered because of that. The reason I like the section when they're children so much is it just creates their characters so profoundly. Introduces a friend of Walt's called Duncan and Duncan's parents. We get a lot about their parents as well, how Walt and Helen's parents are arguing all the time, so it's not a happy marriage. We get that through that section of the book at the start. We get a lot about their own personalities and how they're being built by what they see as children and how adults around them behave when they're children. Their home life seems to create their personalities a lot and influences what they do in the future. We get a lot of that in this first part of the novel, and that's where I think the characters are the best. They seem so consistent and they seem real and more well-rounded at the start of the novel. When the novel progressed to when they're adults themselves, I don't think they felt as real. It felt like the author was trying to throw them into so many situations, maybe to shock, but it just felt like the author was trying too hard to drag his characters from one situation to the next. And for me, it just felt like a case of too much, too often, and you just kind of disengage from them a bit. You don't really care about what happens to them as they go on, as the book goes on, because they're just dragged from just so many different situations, and sometimes they're very odd situations, and just so many of them just felt so repetitive as well. I got a bit sick of it, and I ended up not really caring about what happened to those characters. There's hints here and there in the book that the author wants to explore different angles for the characters, but often it's explored fractionally and then forgotten. One example is when Walt and Helen are both in America. So they're in America because one thing they try to get into is alternative music, and they create a group together, and they get an offer to go and do a tour, a very small tour in America. And while they're there, Walt goes on a bit of a journey of self-discovery of sorts in America while he's there, and he starts to experiment with his sexuality. And we find that he finds that he's either gay or bisexual when he's in America, and that's explored a little bit in the book. And then it's just cut off and forgotten, and for the rest of the book, nothing's ever mentioned about it. So it's almost like it happened, and then it's forgotten, and it's no longer a part of that character. And that's what I mean about the childhood part. Their characters feel so real and so well-rounded and complete. And then later on in the book, when they're adults, these little things are thrown in every now and then. They're there for a very short time and forgotten about, and just feels very disjointed and makes the characters seem less real, less lifelike, because they're bits and pieces at one stage, and then certain bits fall off, new bits are added, and then it's like this monster that gets created, gets reshuffled, and then created again. And that's what it felt like all through this book. I was also a bit disappointed that the parents didn't play a big role throughout the whole book. They're there at the very start, and then they're there towards the end. They're not there in the middle really at all, and there's such a big influence on the children at the start. I thought they would have played more of a role throughout the whole book. So I found it disappointing, and I think that's a bit of a miss by the author. And it also gives me the impression that their short stories join together. Because if it was built or written as a novel, I get the impression that the parents would have played a bit more of a role through the whole story. Walt, one of the main focuses of the book. At the start, he's a great character, and I really enjoyed him at the start, and he was engaging at the start. After that, it felt very one-dimensional, and also, these bits and pieces of his personality and just his whole life coming in, coming out. That exploration of him starting to either be gay or bisexual, and then that being forgotten about as one example. I just felt it so one-dimensional. And there's this strange thing going on where Walt wants to be a communist, or interested in communism, and that just plays as a consistent theme throughout the book. That also feels one-dimensional, because never truly explored. It's just him going on these really strange tangents and these strange ideas of creating offbeat and offshoot communist parties, and then, or clubs, and then forgetting about them, and then creating another one and forgetting about it. And it just continued on through the book. And I got a bit sick of that as well. Helen, who's Walt's sister, at the start of the book, again, very good character, felt really realistic and lifelike. After that section from their childhood, disengaged from the character, there was just so many things thrown into this character's storyline. Just very bizarre things sometimes, over the top, too often, too much. I just totally disengaged and didn't care what this character did. I didn't care if the character lived or died. I just wanted the book to be over, to forget about this character, and also forget about Walt, the brother. Duncan, who's Walt's best friend when they're children, and who kind of falls off a bit and just flits in and out of the book after the first section when they're children. He felt more lifelike than Walt and Helen. That's because not so many crazy things happen to Duncan. He seems to be more centered and more focused as a character, and more stable as a character as well. Seems to be more consistent than the other two. But then again, I think there are small little things, small moments where that consistency drops off, and he does things that I think weren't consistent with how the character was for the rest of the book. Not as often as Walt and Helen, but just enough to tarnish the character a little bit. A good character though, and still I think a better character than Walt or Helen. I didn't think much of this book really at all. I rated it a 1.5 out of 5. 1.5 because of the start of the book. The section where Walt and Helen and Duncan are children. That's a really good section in this book. And unfortunately, it's a very small section compared to the rest of the book. If the whole book was written like that, or if the whole book was just about their childhood, it would have been a much better read, in my opinion. That part of the book just seemed more focused, more coherent, just more well written. The rest of the book just felt like he was trying to throw too much into the book too often. I'm not sure why the author did that, but that was the way it was written, I guess. But I didn't enjoy it and didn't hold my attention, didn't keep me engaged. I wanted the book to be over just so I could finish it. I will be reviewing every book on the Miles Franklin Literary Award long list for 2022. Check out my channel and subscribe if you don't want to miss out on those videos. There's also a Miles Franklin Literary Award playlist on my channel. It should be on your screen now.